So in this activity, what we're going to do is we're going to learn how to use the rotary dial, or the analog rotary dial, to change our LED strip. In a previous video, we got to see how to play around with our LED strip, and here we're going to be able to manually change it. So first thing we're going to need to do, as always, is go to our MakeCode site. We're going to need to create a new project. I'm going to call this one Changing LED Light. And for this project, I'm going to need my LED strip. I'm going to need my Grove Shield. I'm going to need my microbit. And I'm going to need this little rotary sensor. And so this little rotary sensor is a little knob that you turn. Okay. So think of it as just like any other dial that you would turn. It turns about 360 degrees. And you're going to need a little cable to connect it to your Grove Shield and microbit. So first up is, anytime you're dealing with your LED strip, we need to add a NeoPixel extension. So usually NeoPixel is right at the top when you click on extension. So, and there it is. We're going to click on them. And we're going to add that NeoPixel block. And as always, our microbit doesn't really know about the LED strip, so we need to tell it. And we always tell it in that onStart block. And it already builds in a variable called strip. You can do that variable, that strip. And we're going to drag it over to my onStart. There it is. Okay. There it is in my onStart block. And I'm going to set it, and I'm going to plug my LED strip, and I'm going to plug my LED strip in the pin P0. Okay, so that's the first one after the I2C port. And again, remember, the I2C port is only going to be used with our little OLED screen. So P0 is going to be for my LED strip. And most of our LEDs have 30 LEDs, little bulbs inside of that strip. And we can leave everything else the same, as it is a RGB, red, green, blue format. Now, in my forever loop, this is where we're going to want to have things to run for a long time. All right, what we're going to need is, we're going to need in my NeoPixel, we're going to need to be able to show something on the strip. So let's say that we want to show the rainbow or show something like that. So we're going to have it rotate between rainbow colors. Okay, and we can see how we can play around with the different blocks here. So the strip is a rainbow, and I'm going to have it go from 1. Okay, so this was based upon Adafruit's kind of rainbow disc, which was a circle. And so think of it as going around in a rainbow loop. So kind of going from blue all the way around to red as a circle. So that's where the 360 comes from. And what we're going to do is we're going to need to create something called a map. And what we're trying to do here is we're going to map the position of the dial to a color on the rainbow strip. And we do that by going under our pins block. And it's under advanced. If you don't have that open, you click on pins, and you're going to see this big oval circle in the middle. We're going to take that oval circle and we're going to drag it to where it says 360. Now, what we have to do is map our dial to the LED. Okay? And our dial is an analog device, which means it's a continuous. And what we have to do is, under my pins, we have to read what that setting is for my dial. And so here I've got analog read pin. So I'm going to read what position my dial is in. I'm going to put that on the map. Okay. So let's go back over here and plug in my dial. I'm going to plug my dial into P1. Okay, so now I've got my dial there, and I need to make sure in my code that I change that to P1. And it's going to go from 0 to 1023. Those are analog numbers. Okay, and it's going to go from a low of 0, and I want a rainbow. So I'm going to have it go all the way through my entire rainbow, all the way to 360. Okay, so I'm going to download my code. Okay, it should be now in my downloads folder. So let's go check and see if it's there. There it is. I called it Changing Light. Oh, there he is. So now I've got to plug in my microbit. So let's plug in my microbit into my shield. And here's my USB cable. And we'll wait for it to get found by the computer. There, it just found it. So now we're going to drag that program to the microbit. And we have to wait for it to complete the download. And again, your yellow light on the back will also be blinking. So now it's done. Now, it should work just with it plugged into the microbit. But again, if we want to make sure that we have sufficient power, we switch it over to the Grove Shield, because there we can push more power through our circuit. And now, what I should be able to do is change my LED lights by just turning my knob. And so now you've created a little changeable LED light. And you can go back into your code and you can manipulate these numbers. Right, so you can say that I don't really want to have, say, a lot of reds in it, and you can change that 360 to a different number. And then it will cap out at a certain limit on where it will change. Or you can go back to your NeoPixel block and say, I now want to show a bar graph, and I want to map that. And you can see what happens when you download and run that program. But that's really all that you need to do to be able to control your little analog switch. And again, it's basically giving you a number, and you're converting that number into, mapping it into some other range, and that range is what's changing your LED strip.